In an effort to produce the 80,000 ventilators needed in order to save lives in the United States during this pandemic, the Trump administration was working with GM and one other organization, one other company, to develop and produce these ventilators. And there was a story published by the New York Times. There's a big update to it about how the Trump administration actually ended up backing away from making that deal because they were concerned about the $1 billion price tag that was attached to it. Now, as we know, both the Senate and the House just passed their stimulus legislation, and that would cost $2 trillion. So $1 billion to save lives sounds like something that you should spend money on. But after, I guess, enough pushback, Trump has agreed to make this deal, and GM will be producing the ventilator. So, Cenk, I wanted you to jump in since you have the update on that story.
Yeah. So Trump just invoked the Defense Production Act, and he will be forcing GM to actually make the ventilators. Now, let's talk this through because Trump, as usual, has given incorrect information several times. And it's a tweet. So with Trump, you never really know, right? But in the past, he was like, GM's got to do something. This is ridiculous. And then he'd turn around and be like, we don't need the ventilators. Cuomo's exaggerating. I don't know if we need to do this at all. I'm canceling the deal. And then now he's back to right before he said he's definitely doing it. He put out a saying, well, we need the D or the P, right? I'm like, why not all 3 letters? It's not a lot of letters. Okay. I think it was a P, come to think of it, not the D.
Yeah, I was
going to say. Okay. Anyway, so, and it looks like based on the last tweet, he is going to force them to do it. Now, what's the difference? They were already negotiating about doing it. Why force them to do it? Because he appears to be saying he's unhappy about the price and the delay in dealing with GM. No, now let's be fair. If GM is actually trying to price gouge, well, then he's right to be upset, right? And you can't have it both ways, guys. We always have to be honest, okay? So it's possible that they could have made a deal, and for $1 billion, you get 20 ventilators, and then we'd all be so mad at how much we overpaid that giant corporation. And at the same time, we need those ventilators. So it's actually possible in this case that Trump did the right thing, that if GM was being a little too obstinate or trying to make too much profit off of it, he's like, oh, yeah, Defense Production Act, and I'm done with it. You're going to do it now, and we'll worry about the price later. So we don't know enough of those details to know for sure, but I'm glad they're doing the ventilators. They should have done this a long, long time ago. We can talk more about that in a second.
Definitely. So we have some video of Trump really undermining the necessity for ventilators. Well, we'll go to that in a minute. But I wanted to make a point about how, we just agreed to a massive multi-trillion-dollar bailout for corporations that have dodged taxes throughout the years, that have shipped jobs abroad throughout the years, that have underpaid their workers throughout the years. And so it's just fascinating to see where the priorities are, because I get it. If we feel like we're being price gouged by GM, well, then maybe there can be some pressure placed by the Trump administration in order to get them to lower the prices to produce these ventilators. But in the grand scheme of things, $1 billion is nothing compared to what we're willing to spend in taxpayer money to bail out these corporations. And keep in mind, these ventilators would literally save lives. So the messaging here, and if you just focus on the optics, is, the issue that we keep bringing up throughout this show, which is this country seems to value corporate profits more than human lives. I would much rather invest taxpayer money in creating or producing the products that we need to keep people alive, as opposed to spending that money to bail out companies that, by the way, didn't do what we're expected to do as average Americans. They didn't save up for a rainy day, right? So that's the reason why as soon as the coronavirus, started, all these companies really started to feel the economic pressure.
Yeah. So look, I agree with you 1,000,000,000% on. So we have apparently $4.25 trillion for corporations to make sure they're healthy, but we're having like this giant price negotiation over $1 billion, which is 0.05% of the bailout money to keep actual human beings healthy. And so I don't mind a negotiation back and forth, and I want us to get the best price, but I want that to be consistent on all of this, and it certainly hasn't been. And overall, here on that point, look, the ventilators should have been one of the top priorities. Number one should have been the test kits. Number two should have been masks, and number three should have been ventilators. And if you have good, competent management, you would have had all these things lined up, and you would have been panicking. My God, what if we run out of ventilators? Then we're going to have to tell doctors or give guidance to the government, to the state governments, on who to prioritize in saving lives and who to let die. That's an insane, unacceptable decision. So we've got to get the ventilators right now before they run out in New York and other places. And I didn't see any of that urgency until today.
I totally agree with you. And a lot of these products are manufactured in other countries, and not just the ventilators, but also the face masks that nurses and doctors need in order to protect themselves while they're treating patients with COVID-19. And so there's a price to pay when you really think about it. When we ship everything, all of the manufacturing to other countries, because when you have a global pandemic like this, we can't rely on our own supply chain in order to produce the products that we need. Now, GM, of course, manufactures cars, but the technology and the equipment that they have is different from what's necessary to build the ventilators, which is why even with GM's help, it's going to take some time to produce the ventilators. But I'm just making a point about how we need to really rethink how we manufacture things and how we've shipped a lot of our manufacturing jobs abroad. It actually does put us at a disadvantage in many ways, including, of course, shipping jobs abroad. But with that said, I do want to go to Trump's interview with Sean Hannity. He felt the need to really minimize the need for as many ventilators as we actually do need to keep people alive. Let's take a look.
New York is a bigger deal, but it's going to go also. But I have a feeling that a lot of the numbers that are being said in some areas are just bigger than they're going to be. I don't believe you need 40,000 or 30,000 ventilators. You know, you go into major hospitals sometimes, they'll have 2 ventilators, and now all of a sudden they're saying, can we order 30,000 ventilators?
So the doctor that Fox News actually keeps having on to share her expertise, her name is Nicole Safier, tweeted immediately after that segment and said the following: regardless of what anyone says, ventilators are low in supply and we need as many as we can possibly get while we continue to slow the spread. And she's absolutely right. And if you just look at the way people commented on that, they just expect her to be loyal to Trump and agree with everything he says. And I'm glad that she didn't. I'm glad that she told the truth about how much we need the ventilators.
Yeah. So look, it's so painful to see how incompetent and ridiculous our president is. And this is the time that you need someone who's really smart and competent and a good manager. And he has none of that ability. I mean, it is so unbelievably irresponsible to go on television and say, a lot of hospitals have only 1 or 2 ventilators. Not remotely true. There is no major hospital with only 1 or 2 ventilators, not within a million miles of true. And to minimize it when you obviously need a lot of ventilators, you know how many cases New York alone has now? Last I checked, it was around 37,000. By today, it was supposed to pass 40,000. Well, Cuomo said they needed 40,000 ventilators. Not everybody who has COVID-19 needs a ventilator, but it's growing exponentially. Every single day, it seems to literally every 2 days, the cases double. Now, they won't double forever, obviously, right? But it's going at a crazy rate. And they need those ventilators. And Jacob Javits Center has been turned into a giant hospital. But if you don't have the ventilators, it doesn't help. So for him to go out there and go, oh, what's the big deal? We don't need that many. And then if you think that's true, then why are you panicking over General Motors right now? He's so inconsistent. He's such a buffoon. And this is not about politics. And people say, oh, you shouldn't say that stuff about Trump because you're making it political. No, we need somebody competent right now. I mean, he doesn't have to step aside politically. I don't give a damn. Just have an adult run this goddamn thing.
Right. But he has so much of an ego. He would never allow that to happen. And he likes to delegate among his own family members. And that's a huge issue as well. If you can recall, like in the beginning of the pandemic, Donald Trump decided to just listen to the advice of his son-in-law, Jared Kushner. And Jared Kushner thought this was nothing more than a PR stunt by the Democrats in order to hurt Trump's chances of re-election. Well, now we're learning that, unfortunately, Trump has decided to turn to Jared Kushner yet again when it comes to something as serious as the ventilators. The New York Times reported that at the center of the discussion about how to ramp up the production of ventilators is Jared Kushner, who has told people that he was called in 2 weeks ago by Vice President Mike Pence to produce more coronavirus test kits, and who has now turned his attention to ventilators. So that's definitely not a promising update.
No, it's a carnival, man. It's a three-ring circus. So what difference does it matter, or what difference does it make which particular clown is in charge? There's not a competent person within miles of the Oval Office. So here, let me read you the Trump tweets from earlier in the day that I was referring to in the beginning. He's now invoked the DPA, but at the time he was saying, as usual with this General Motors, and he has a this in quotes. I don't know what that means. Okay, as usual with this General Motors, things just never seem to work out. They were going to give us 40,000 much needed ventilators. You just said you didn't need them. Anyway, quote, very quickly. Now they're saying it will only be 6,000 in late April, and they want top dollar. Always a mess with Mary B. And then he says, invoke P. I think that because it's DPA, right? Defense Production Act. He might have said invoke D. And then people were like, no, that doesn't sound good. So he randomly went with the middle initial. Okay. Invoke P. Okay. And then the next tweet is, General Motors must immediately open their stupidly abandoned Lordstown plant in Ohio or some other plant and start making ventilators now. Ford, get going on ventilators fast. I read those like that because they're in all caps with 1,000 exclamation points. Which child says their stupidly abandoned Lordstown plant? This child that's in charge.
The only role of government is to keep people safe. Right? Like the only role that I think both parties agree on fundamentally is that it's supposed to keep us safe. This is a huge public health issue. This is a huge problem in so many parts of the country. And by the way, we're not even at the peak of that curve yet. So more people are getting tested. We're starting to learn more and more about the severity of coronavirus's spread in the United States. It was just reported that we now lead the country or lead the world when it comes to the number of people infected with coronavirus. And it's just terrifying that you have this incompetent fool, leading us, I mean, obviously badly, through this pandemic. It's terrifying because so many people are going to lose their lives due to his incompetence. And I agree with you, Cenk. This is not about politics. It's about accurately critiquing the failures of the president, the one person who is supposed to handle this situation based on what experts are telling him. And he's not doing that. He's just this shoot from the hip kind of guy who doesn't take anything seriously unless it impacts him specifically.
Now, look, last thing on this. I just can't stand the on the other hand stuff in this situation. If you're talking about some political thing that's important but not life-threatening, okay, CNN wants to say on the one hand this and on the other hand that, and that's what everybody, New York Times, NPR, PBS, they all want to say the same thing, right? And they think they're tough on Trump, but half the time they totally excuse him, right? Okay, but in a situation like this, no, there's a right and wrong. We don't have the damn mass, and people are getting it nonstop. Another expert came out today, said that there might be 100 million cases in America alone. Boris Johnson now has coronavirus. Prince Charles has coronavirus. I mean, this thing is massively contagious. And you're sending in doctors and nurses to treat people without masks. That's insane. Now we're getting to the last level where you don't have ventilators when people need ventilators. In about, not this minute, but it looks like based on the trends, in about 2 weeks, we're going to be out of ventilators. And so if you go to the hospital or your parents go to the hospital and they need a ventilator, we're going to let them die. And so don't talk to me about, well, you're being impolite and politically incorrect if you say Donald Trump is a moron who can't manage a goddamn thing. He couldn't begin to ask the right questions, let alone execute the right strategy in a complicated, important matter like this. We should have never, ever elected a stupid carnival barker like Donald Trump, because a president matters.
Thanks for watching The Young Turks. Really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.